This is AgGrad Live.
We have all of the different segments within the cotton.
The show that explores what it's really like to work in the ag industry.
So making sure that we get policy and regulatory issues
straight from the people who live it every day. Back with another episode of AgGrad Live. It's been really fun to get some different guests on there, all with their own take on what has helped them in their career. I think the information we've been getting so far, and we'll get again today, is useful whether you are pre-career, still in college, early career, maybe a year or two out, or even later in your career. I think this whole idea of becoming a lifelong learner is something that we can all benefit from thinking about. Certainly, I get a lot of questions from new graduates or people about to graduate about, well, I don't feel like I know enough to enter the workforce because I haven't learned enough. And the good news is there's plenty to learn and plenty of resources out there to tap into to continue to improve your skills, both personally and professionally. Thank you to those of you who are joining us live on Facebook. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be here. If you can't watch this live, you can always catch all of these episodes both on our YouTube channel. Just look for AgGrad on YouTube, or as a podcast. We release these as a podcast called AgGrad Live. So check those out as well. But you're not here to see me. You are here to welcome our guest here this evening. We have with us Kiah Twisselman. Kiah, I'm going to bring you on to AgGrad Live. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Well, this is really exciting, but before I get too into the lifelong learning stuff, let's just get a brief background on you. I know you are the Director of Consumer Affairs at the Kentucky Beef Council, so maybe start by telling us what that means and how you came to be in that position.
Sure. So for people that don't really know what a beef council is, I guess I'll start there. Every state in the country has a beef checkoff program, as they do for other commodity groups and organizations. And so we are funded by the Kentucky Beef Checkoff, the Beef Council is. And every farmer in the state, when a head of cattle is sold, they pay $2 into the beef checkoff. And that money comes to our office. And our job is to advocate on Kentucky's 38,000 beef cattle farmers, with connecting with consumers, reaching out via social media, different advertising campaigns, teaching consumers how to cook beef. So in my role as the Director of Consumer Affairs, I manage all of our social media platforms. I manage all of our advertising buys, sponsorships, consumer events, you name it under the sun. We get to do a lot of exciting different things. So my job looks a little bit different every single day. But I haven't always been a Kentuckian. I have been in this job for about 3 years now. It'll be 3 years next month. But I'm originally from California. So I grew up on my family's, what's now is 7th generation cattle ranch in San Luis Obispo County, California. But I was a rebel in the family, and I did not go to Cal Poly. I went to UC Davis. Go Aggies. I know, Tim, you graduated there too. So
that's right. Proud. Very proud.
Very proud. And when I first went to UC Davis, I knew that I wanted to work with people, and I thought that maybe I wanted to go a medical route. So I kind of wanted to be a nurse. But I took chemistry for the first time, and I realized that nursing was not for me. So my degree was human development at UC Davis. And thankfully for me, human development falls under the College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences at UC Davis. And so I was able to take a lot of ag classes, kind of satisfy my hunger for agriculture that I still had. And even though I graduated with a degree in human development, I knew through my college experience that I wanted to do something in the agriculture field, something related to it. And so for those of you out there that are in a maybe a degree that you don't know if this is something for you, know that there are possibilities after graduation, even if you did not get a degree in the field you want to be in.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. So do you feel like that's ever held you back, being a human development major and trying to create a career in agriculture? Because a lot of people use that as kind of an excuse, like, well, sure, I wish I would have majored in this, then I would have the career I wanted to. But for you, has that ever been something that's held you back?
It's funny. I kind of expected it to. Like, what would human development have to do with agriculture? But in a way, it really worked to my benefit, especially for this position. There were no other human development degree people that were applying for my job. And it worked out well for me because I had that agriculture experience from growing up on a cattle ranch that kind of checked the ag box for me. And I was so involved in other agriculture organizations throughout my college career. But my employer actually saw human development as being something different. They wanted to try something new. She might have more experience relating to consumers. And so it's funny, I thought it would work against me, but overall it's really worked in my benefit. And I personally think that a lot of the things that people learn in college come from the parts that aren't necessarily directly related to their degree. Everybody learns critical thinking in college, how to write an essay, how to be timely, how to interact, work in a group. And I think that those lessons, no matter what your degree is in, are going to be valuable in the workforce for sure.
Right on. And yeah, the lessons is exactly what we want to talk about here today. And thank you to those who have joined us live. I know we've got Deborah on here. I imagine some sort of relation.
She's my mom. Good mom. Good mom.
And then also Brent. Thanks for being here, Brent. And all of you join us live. If any of you have a question that you want to throw into the comments, we'd be glad to ask Kiah live here. Talk to us about lifelong learning. How do you look at this? And I'm trying to look for an entry point into this conversation on lifelong learning. What does that mean to you, and kind of what does that look like for you day to day?
So I think lifelong learning is something that we can look at in a professional aspect, but also in a personal aspect. Most people, I think when they graduate college, they realize that they don't know everything in their field. But some people, I think, might leave college or have some experience in a career field, and they think that they know what they need to know. They've got it down. They're ready to roll. But I think that one of the best things to do, there's a Socrates quote that says, I am intelligent because I know that I know nothing. And I think that that is such an important thing to think about and consider, that no matter where you are in your career, even if you're late in your career, there is always more to learn. And especially if you're in a career like I am in marketing, where everything is changing all the time, you have to keep on top of things on a day-to-day basis or you're already behind. So I think that there's a ton of tools that you can use when it comes to lifelong learning. But I think that being dedicated to be a lifelong learner is something that you really need to promise yourself. In our day, there's only 24 hours and it gets filled with life and all sorts of complicated things. So what I've found works well for me is that I make a point to carve out some time somewhere in my day for a learning experience. And it doesn't have to be a long amount of time, and it could be something related to personal or professional. But one of the things that I do is I subscribe to this newsletter, and the newsletter is called the Daily Carnage, and it is a marketing newsletter. And in their newsletter, it's always in my inbox every single morning. There is a podcast that they've shared, a blog post that they've shared, and a video that they've shared, all related to marketing. And so that's my way of, I know every morning there is a newsletter in my inbox with new content related to my degree field or my working field that I can go in, refresh, check it out. And that's just one small thing that takes me 5-10 minutes maximum.
Very cool. And how long did it take for you to sort of develop this lifelong learning mindset? And I guess for somebody who's kind of wondering, hey, I know I'm not where I want to be. I want to kind of improve, but I don't really know where to start. Kind of where would you point them to start? And maybe they're in marketing like you are. I think a daily newsletter like that, I know I've heard of other people getting daily newsletters. I get one from Politico about kind of the ag happenings. I bet you've probably seen that one. There's a lot of free resources, but where would you advise someone to start that's kind of, they're at point A, want to get to point B, but not sure where to get going?
Sure. So I think that even before you look at any of these free resources or newsletters or podcasts or blogs or whatever, those are all great. But I think the first thing that someone should do is, if they know they're not where they want to be, they should look at the people that are where they want to be. And I think it's so important that in your life, wherever you are at in your life, that you have someone like a professional role model or someone that you can look to and say, I know that in 5 years, I want to be where that person is. And the best way to know how to get there is build a relationship with them. I think that, if you are the smartest person in the room, I think that you're standing in the wrong room. And I think the best way to know about how to achieve the goals that you want to reach is to find the people that have already achieved that or that are in their career, because they can provide you so much more knowledge from their experience and the steps that they took that you might not even realize.
Sure. Why do you think, it sounds kind of obvious, like, well, of course, everybody wants to improve and develop themselves and be successful. But the fact is, a lot of people don't. What do you think it is that stops people from really embracing this idea of becoming a lifelong learner?
I think one of it is it's really easy to just get stuck in the same routine. I know that it happens to me all the time, and it does take effort to put yourself out there to seek out opportunities for learning, whether that's personal or professional. And it's easy to just get lazy and say, I'm just going to go, show up to work, do what I do, go to bed, do the next thing the same way the next day. And so I think that that's one thing. But I think that there are so many ways that you can continue to learn, and it doesn't have to be an intensive course or this daunting task, but just make it a point to learn something new every day. And one of the things that I've learned in my experience through internships, through my career field that I'm in now, is when you're young and in a new position, you're going to get tasks that you have no idea how to do. And the best thing that you can do is, of course, it's great to ask questions, but even better than that, I think it's really important to learn to be a self-starter and be self-motivated to seek out the learning that you need. It's happened to me countless times at my job where they've told me, Kiah, I need you to develop this newsletter with this program and send it out this date to these people. And I would have had no experience with maybe the software that I'm using or how to contact these people or how to implement something. But one of the best tools that are out there is YouTube, honestly. Just to take it upon yourself. And if there's something you do not know how to do, be a self-starter, figure it out. And that is going to build so much clout for you in your job with your bosses. And maybe my boss is just easy to impress when it comes to social media, because he always like, well, how'd you figure out how to do that? I'm like, I YouTubed it.
No, I think that is one advantage also that maybe people who grew up with the internet is they're used to having resources at their fingertips and knowing kind of where to find them. I'm glad you brought up YouTube, because I agree. I use YouTube for everything. But I think that first it takes the mindset of, all right, I can go get what I need to learn. And it also kind of takes this mindset of, if I'm not good at it at first, I'm just going to kind of stick with it and repeat. Have you taken any sort of like formal online course or online training at all to help with your career?
I haven't taken any formal training yet, but my employer has offered the opportunity. A few of the experiences that I had this year was I'm thankful that I work for a company that invests in some professional development. And so I've seeked out a few different conferences, which is basically a way for me to be in the room with the experts in their field. This year, I went to San Diego for a Social Media World conference put on by Social Media Examiner. I just attended an Ag Relations Council training, going to Ag Media Summit this year. So seeking out those opportunities for you to learn from the professionals, to build networks with those professionals. So, if I have a question about Facebook Live videos, I have a relationship with Tim, and I can message Tim and ask him a question. And I think that building that network at those conferences and professional development places is great. But I think formal classes is also a good tool as well. And one thing too that I think is important for people that are seeking out jobs, is whether you're in college or out of college or not, if there's a job, let's say that you are at point A and you want to be at point B, and there's this dream job position that you have, but you're not qualified, take the initiative to look at what areas and expertise that they're looking for. And if you know that that's where you want to be, go ahead and start developing those skills now so that you will be able to apply for those opportunities in the future and be a good candidate.
Yeah, definitely. And conferences would be a great way to do that. So for you specifically, you went to Social Media Marketing World. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what's one thing from Social Media Marketing World that you're going to take away that you think will directly benefit you in your work?
I think that honestly, Social Media Marketing World kind of was like drinking out of a fire hose. Like there's just so much coming at you, and there's only so much you can take in. But one of the best things about that conference is that they give you access to all of the sessions on video later. So I can pull up a session tomorrow that happened at the conference, and I can hear something that maybe I missed. But one thing that I think is really interesting for me is that I have a tendency to go to a lot of conferences with people that are in agriculture. And this was a conference that was focused on social media, but it had people from all over the world, from all over, just all areas of expertise. You had people that had small businesses, large corporations, Ironically, the first person I met was a vegetarian because that is just how my life goes. But you get to meet so many diverse people from different areas. And I think that connecting with them to find out what works well for them, I think that those anecdotal things can be really powerful too.
So wait, so how does that conversation go? Hi, of course, a lot of vegetarians like to share the fact they're vegetarians, and it's like, what do you do for a living?
So I am a people person. I love people. I've never met a stranger. You couldn't tell. Yeah, I've never met a stranger. Like, I just love people. And so I had just gone to the conference. I went to check in with my badge. I didn't know anybody that was there at this point. And there was a table and there was a girl sitting there at the table. So of course I go and sit down and I'm talking to her, and she's from England. And so I'm just listening to her speak because I just love accents so much. And we were talking and we had such a great conversation, like a 10-minute conversation. And then she asked me where I worked. And I said, I work for the Kentucky Beef Council. She's like, oh, cool. That's great. And I was like, what about you? And she's like, oh, I work for this business. And we added each other on Instagram, and her Instagram handle was like fruit bat fly or something. And I was like, oh, that's funny. Where'd that come from? She's like, oh, I'm actually a vegan. But we became such good friends. I hung out with her multiple other times during the conference. And, a lot of people are like, vegans would not want to be friends with you, but it's all about people. People and people connect. There's always something that you can have in relation to each other. But, yeah, I feel like I always end up accidentally seeking out the people that should probably not like me.
No, I think of course, I'm kind of like digressing from the topic here, but I think that's such a great point that a lot of times, especially in agriculture loves to talk about the consumer, which is this unnamed, nameless, faceless person that buys the products that we produce. And when you just start looking at them as real people with, real opinions and real lives and the same problems we all have, I think it humanizes it quite a bit. So
absolutely.
I think that's cool. Well, I know when we were setting up this call, you had mentioned something called social productivity. What is social productivity?
So I was looking through the questions before our interview, and I was like, oh, yeah, we're going to talk about social productivity. And I was curious. And so I just threw it in Google just to see what would pop up. And Google and I have very different definitions.
Okay.
Google, if you Google social productivity, they'll pop up with a bunch of apps for ways that you can organize your life and your workspace. And that's great. And those are great tools. But the social productivity that I embody, it's kind of like my life motto. In fact, my roommate in college, we wrote social productivity on the underside of our grad caps because we felt it was that important. But you already know that I'm a people person, and I am a bit of an extrovert. And I know that it might be different for other people. Some people are drained by social interaction, and that's fine. If it's nature that gives you energy, then have your nature productivity. But for me, I think, especially in college, there's all this pressure to do really well. You have to go to classes, you have to be involved, you have to build resumes, seek out jobs. And it's so easy to want to just lock yourself in a room and study and be prepared and just work on that grind. But I think more than anything, what I took away from college was less about, what grade I got on that chemistry test. I know it was probably not very good. But what I do remember was taking that weekend to go with my Young Cattlemen's Association group and go to Red Bluff for that bull sale. And I remember the people that I met and the things that we did. And I remember getting together with people that were in Aggie Ambassadors with me. And I remember, just developing the real relationships around me with my peers. And I think that sometimes people think that being social is being unproductive. And sure, it can be. But I think that there is so much productivity that comes from these social interactions. And, whether that's even just developing your network, but taking a break from a task, taking time for yourself, to remove yourself from whatever your work thing is, whatever your school thing is. Of course, I think it's important to study and do well in school, but I think it's important that that you spend time with the people that energize you and give you new life and new creativity for your ideas. I think it makes us more productive people in general. But I'm also a social butterfly, so maybe that was my excuse too.
No, it makes sense now. I honestly, I wasn't sure what you meant by referring to it, but that makes perfect sense. We actually have a question here from Brent Let me see if I can get this up on the screen. Brent's asking, what are your thoughts on freelancing while having a full-time job? Is it worth the hassle? I'll let you tackle this one first, and then I'll add some of my thoughts here.
Sure. Tim, you probably have more experience with this to contribute to the question, but I think that it depends. I know that I am working on starting some freelancing on the side of my full-time job. And I think that it depends on how motivated you are by the work in your freelancing. I think it's important that you have work-life balance. And if you don't have enough time for yourself at the end of the day, I think that maybe you shouldn't look to add more to your plate. But I think that freelancing can be a really great way to develop more of your skills professionally and personally. It could also be another outlet for you creatively. Right now with freelancing, I'm helping some ranches develop some brands and logos and social media presence. And I love it because I'm so passionate about agriculture and what I'm doing that freelancing is kind of another way for me to be creative and to help out these businesses that I believe so much in. But what are your thoughts about that, Tim?
Yeah, well, AgGrad sort of started as a side hustle, and so I think two things. First of all, Brent, I think if you're asking, you're curious enough that it's worth trying out. I think similar to what we were talking about earlier with lifelong learning in general, you've got to be comfortable with saying, "Hey, I don't know if this is going to work out or if this is going to go anywhere, but I'm interested enough, I'm curious enough about this that I'm going to give it a try." For me, I found it to be a challenge to sort of compartmentalize my full-time job and this thing I felt like I was growing on the side. What kept me going is I really did feel like it would become my full-time job, my full-time business. I think if I didn't have that, if I didn't think it was ever going to become a full-time business for me, I probably wouldn't have been able to stay motivated to keep doing it and to keep the two separate, because that can be really tough, especially with a family as well. But I think if you're asking the question, Brent, I think you are ready to try out this side hustle. You're curious enough, would be my guess.
Tim, am I allowed to ask you questions?
Oh, sure.
So you had talked about AgGrad kind of started off as this side hustle, and you knew that, or you hoped that it would turn into something full time. How did you, as you were growing the side hustle before you left your full time job, how did you find the balance between the two of them? Because I'm sure as AgGrad grew, it became more time consuming and demanded more of your time.
Yeah, so I sort of I cheated in a way. What I mean by cheated is I knew if I could commit more time to AgGrad, it would grow, but I knew I didn't have that time. And so I actually stumbled upon an opportunity to buy into a recruiting network. And so in a way, I bought an existing business, and that's what kind of tipped the scales for me to actually leave my full-time job to do this full-time. I think I would have had to go on a lot longer as a side hustle, and it would have been a lot harder to grow if I hadn't kind of bought into this recruiting network, because what I bought was an existing clientele, an existing database of job seekers. And so it was easy for me. I kind of took I hedged myself. So it was still a business, but it was an existing business that had some momentum that helped me sort of transition, because now I still am part of that network. I still recruit full time, but it's part of AgGrad, and I can, the lines are a lot more blurry about when I'm working on AgGrad and when I'm just doing straight recruiting.
Gotcha.
So I cheated in a way. Well, talk to us for you just in general. I think this is a good segue into just how you handle all of your responsibilities and balancing work and life. I think work-life balance is, in some ways, it's overgeneralized. In some ways, it's a myth, but everybody's got their own way of looking at it and approaching it. And I'm curious to hear what yours is.
Sure. So I'm going to segue kind of to another story into the answer, if that's okay.
Sounds great.
So I went to UC Davis. And when I graduated UC Davis, I was a part of this program called Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange for Young Professionals, which is a mouthful. It's CBYX for short, but it's a program that's funded through the U.S. Congress and the German Parliament to build grassroots transatlantic ties between the two countries. And so they send 75 Americans to Germany for a year and 75 Germans to the U.S. for the year. And so I lived in Germany for a year after I graduated because I didn't have any international experience. I didn't study abroad. And I also wanted to put off the real world for another year. Let's be honest. But one of the really valuable lessons that I learned in Germany, I think, was the culture around working there. It's so different than the US. I think that here in the US, there's this culture around work that people wear busy as a badge of honor. Like who can show up to work first, who will stay the latest, who will put in the most overtime, makes people feel more successful or seem more successful. And I think that could be really detrimental to us. From like just a personal standpoint and mental health, I think it's very important that we have that balance, that we, of course, have our work dedicated to our working time, but that we also have something that we enjoy outside of work, whether that's a small, simple hobby. If it's reading, if it's doing photography, some way for you to find enjoyment throughout the day that's separate from work entirely. And then also to just have time for your personal life. And I will be totally transparent with you and say that I struggle with this. And it's something that I am continuing trying to better myself with. I think that for me, sometimes it's hard for me to turn work off because it's something that I'm so passionate about in my work life and in my personal life. My family raises cattle, so advocating for beef is just kind of ingrained in me. And it's so easy for me to want to do a lot of work stuff in my personal time, which I guess one says that I must be in the right career field. But two, it does make it a little bit challenging. And sometimes I blur the lines between working and relaxing or taking time for me. But I think that by finding hobbies that you enjoy or something that you enjoy doing. I've recently taken up amateur photography and I love it. It's so fun. It's a way for me to express myself and create separate from stuff that I have to do for work. But of course that also will serve me well in work later. But I do think that that's something that I'm still working on. But in Germany, they're all about you work when you get to work and you're done when you check out. You don't check emails at night. And for some people that probably works great, others not so much, but I'm in the process of working on it still.
Okay, so are those your photos behind you there?
Yes, these are.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
Sorry, there's also like a dead ram skull. Hopefully that doesn't offend anybody.
That's cool. I like it. So I bet you're like a lot of ambitious people, which is you can attribute at least some of your success to saying yes. And sometimes that can get hard as you get deeper and deeper into your work and your hobbies and your life is just, you can't say yes to everything. So how have you figured out how to say yes to the right things and say no to things that maybe are going to be too much?
Yeah, I am definitely a yes person and a people pleaser, and those things just don't go well together. But again, I will be totally transparent and say that this is also something that I am continuing to work on. But I think that when you're young and there's all these opportunities ahead of you, I think that it's important in some ways to cast a wide net, try out different things, see what you like versus what you don't like. That way you know what to say yes to and what to say no to later on. But I think too, it's remembering that in any given day, you only have so many hours. You only have so much time for your work life, for your personal life, and knowing that if you say yes to everything, it's kind of like saying kind of to everything. Because if you do everything, you can't really do anything that well. So I think prioritizing is super important and realizing that saying yes to something new can be a great thing, but you have to think about what you might have to sacrifice in order to say yes to that thing.
No, I think that is so true. And it's tough. I struggle with this. Especially when it comes to somebody, asking me to do something that I have a relationship with. I want to make them happy. I want to, accommodate them, but you can't do everything. Right. And so learning to say no is something that it's almost like you need to say yes to as many things as possible to find out what later on in life to say no to, but then you got to actually learn to say no as well. It's right. It's a struggle for me. All right. Well, I would just love to hear kind of like what's next for Kiah. What can the AgGrad community do to either follow along with your career journey or support you from here?
Sure. What's next for Kiah? Lord, I don't know. No, but I really love Kentucky. I hate being so far away from home. I wish with all my might that I could somehow drag California and Kentucky closer together, but it's not looking very good right now. But I love my job here in Kentucky. I absolutely love working on behalf of Kentucky's cattle farmers. So I could definitely see myself staying here for a while. I think that there is still so much I have to learn from the Kentucky Beef Council and the beef industry, and some really exciting opportunities with work moving forward. One of the things I'm really excited about this year is we recently went away from our agency. And so now we're bringing a lot of our creative and campaign development in-house for advertising. And I can't wait to use my new Kentucky culture that I've developed to put together these exciting campaigns for the Beef Council. But the other thing I'm really excited about too is on my personal life is my family's ranch, Twisselman Ranch. You should check them out online on Facebook and Instagram. We just started doing some agritourism, and agritourism is like my dream. I love, like I said, I love people. I love connecting with strangers, and I love sharing the story of agriculture and giving people those incredible once in a lifetime experience on the farm or on the ranch. And so I'm excited to help develop our ranch brand and get more people there to experience the wild, wild west of California. Looking forward to that. But if people want to follow along, if you like seeing a lot of pictures of beef in general and maybe cows, you can follow me on Instagram. It's Kiah_Twisselman. I know I have two really weird names, so I'll put a link in the comments afterwards. But yeah, I too, even though I'm in a career and it's been 3 years, I'm always open to new opportunities and looking forward to what it will happen in the future.
Cool. Well, I tried to put your username there for Instagram up on the screen, but make sure you do put it in the comments in case I mess something up there. I'm always worried as I'm typing those captions up, I'm going to spell something wrong. So put that in the comments. Make sure those of you watching or listening follow along with Kiah's adventures as someone who grew up in a really interesting part of California and now is communicating on behalf of the Kentucky Beef Council. So Kiah, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate this.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been fun.
It has been fun. And I always forget to do this because I'm never thinking about the podcast as I'm recording the Facebook Live. But for those of you listening on the podcast or have ever listened on the podcast, we would love it if you would leave us a rating and review on iTunes. I have never once asked for that because I'm always thinking video. I'm not thinking about podcasts when we record these things. But please head over to iTunes, take 30 seconds, leave us a rating and review, and help people find this via podcast form as well. Kiah, thank you again. We're going to close off here, and we won't be back next week because of 4th of July, but this is a great kind of reflective episode to think on and to take some downtime when you're over the vacation to think about your own lifelong learning. So, Kiah, thank you again.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you for joining AgGrad Live. Visit aggrad.com. That's AgGrad to join the community, create your profile, and learn more about careers in the agriculture industry.